by the time I got married, I already considered myself to be an empowered and educated patient. I'd been dealing with the medical system for a long time, and it took a few years after we were married until I was considered medically stable enough to get pregnant, and thank God I got pregnant very quickly. But one of the ideas I had going in was like, okay, I've been a patient and I've been dealing with medical illness all my life, and I want to have a natural experience. I want this to be different. I was already a nurse. I was already working as a nurse for a few years, and I was like, I'm going to take that knowledge, that education, and I'm going to guide myself to the experience that I want.
Giving birth is one of the most significant events of your life. Sadly, the joy that you should feel can often be replaced with anxiety and helplessness instead. As a labor and delivery nurse, I'm revealing insider information to educate you, reassure you, and decrease your fear. In this podcast, you'll hear empowering birth stories and experts weigh in on a range of topics. Being Jewish also has me exploring Judaism's influence on the reproductive experience. However, I speak to anyone wishing to navigate their journey with more joy and confidence. I'm your host, Chani Fingerer, and you're listening to the Happy Birthway Podcast. Welcome to episode 53 of the Happy Birthway Podcast. So, here's the update. My voice might sound different again because I do have my Blue Yeti microphone now. However, my dear husband forgot the cables, and in his defense, it was not together with my mic, so I should not have expected him to know that it was somewhere else. And I'm still feeling a little bit self-conscious because I'm just using my MacBook Air mic. So please forgive me for that. I'm trying to do my best. Like, this is camp and we improvise. I actually reached out on the camp group chat to see if anyone had the special cords, which are not the regular cords, and nobody did. So I am sitting under my damn blanket right now using my MacBook Air to record this introduction, but maybe we'll have the mic for the last week of camp. Who knows? Anyway, I am really excited to present to you Yonah Chatzinov's 4 birth stories, one so different from the next. I interviewed Yonah 2 episodes back for episode 51, all about her work that she does as a women's health nurse practitioner. And I think you'll find it really interesting to hear about how her original career path completely changed because of her birth. And I find that many people have that. I had that myself. And to me, the most interesting thing was hearing about how different each of her births were. And we haven't had many people on the podcast talk about all of their different births. So I think that this is going to be a great story that you'll enjoy. I wish all of you who are planning to fast or attempting to fast on Sunday an easy fast. Maybe Mashiach will be here and we will not have to fast. But if that is not so, then I highly recommend that you listen to episode 52, which is chock full of amazing information to help you have the best fast that you can. And one more thing before we start, I want to present to you another great podcast hosted and created by a frum female, and that is the Weekly Squeeze by Chanala. For those of you with a weak pelvic floor, just take caution because you might have some bladder leaking from all the laughing that you're going to do when you listen to it. One of the best things to me about this podcast is that it's just light. Like, it's just fun to listen to. Chanala is hilarious, and she's got this great knack at just bringing the serious together in with the funny and with the light. And I'm going to let you hear her trailer for yourself, but I highly, highly recommend it, especially when you just want something light and fun.
Hey everyone, this is Chanala from the Weekly Squeeze. When I am not making music and busy being a supermom to my Israeli kids, I am diving deep into Jewish pop culture. If it's happening in the Jewish world, you're going to hear about it here first. From Israel to Brooklyn and everywhere in between, I will keep you updated on all the comings and goings of Jewish celebs, while I share insider information about what's going on in the professional lives of all the movers and shakers that keep the Jewish entertainment world turning round. Heavy on humor, light on sarcasm, always interesting. The Weekly Squeeze is served fresh twice a week.
Yonah, I would love to hear about your births because you've had quite some interesting, diverse experiences.
I have. So I guess I'd give as background, that I have had Crohn's disease, which is a chronic autoimmune gastrointestinal condition since I was 12. I was diagnosed when I was 14. And it took well into my 20s to get it under control. At that point, I was already married. And it really impacted kind of the start of my journey to motherhood. So by the time I got married, I already considered myself to be an empowered and educated patient. I'd been dealing with the medical system for a long time. And it took a few years after we were married until I was considered medically stable enough to get pregnant. And thank God I got pregnant very quickly. But one of the ideas I had going in was like, okay, I've been a patient and I've been dealing with medical illness all my life, and I want to have a natural experience. I want this to be different. And I have the ability. I mean, I was already a nurse. I was already working as a nurse for a few years, and I was like, I'm going to take that knowledge, that education, and I'm going to guide myself to the experience that I want. So my first birth, but at the same time, I was healthy enough to get pregnant, and then as soon as I got pregnant, I ended up back on steroids. I was not stable medically. So like any idea I had of being this kind of low-key, healthy, normal pregnancy really went out the window. I was hospitalized at 20 weeks with my first pregnancy in a flare, and fine. But I wasn't giving up on my natural birth. Part of that was because there's like a statistic. I don't even know if it's still an accurate statistic, but the statistic that I'd heard was that 2/3 of people who have Crohn's disease end up with surgery, and the surgeries are abdominal. So I didn't want to add any complicating factors of having a C-section. That was like very motivating to me. And I knew so many women who were told when they got a diagnosis of Crohn's that like maybe they could have a couple children, they probably have to have C-sections. And again, what I had read when I went and looked at the research was that wasn't true. That wasn't supported by literature or anything real. It was just something women got told. So I had an extremely supportive gastroenterologist. She's like this wonderful woman from Texas. And she really supported me in doing pregnancy the way I wanted to, and the positivity, and if you want to have 100 babies, you can have 100 babies, like it was really great. So that first pregnancy, I switched doctors a few times. The first, I was working as a nurse, so I was limited by my insurance to a very specific hospital system, which has a 90% epidural rate and a very high C-section rate. So I knew going in that my goals weren't exactly in line with the hospital that I was going to be delivering at, but I didn't have a choice because it was going to cost me a fortune if I went anywhere else. So I went to see an OB at the hospital where I worked, and I told her I had this dream of a natural birth, and I was working critical care at the time, and she said, yeah, well, it's the women who want a natural birth who end up on your unit. And I was like, wow, I'm going to walk out and I'm not going to come back.
I hate that stereotype that is completely unfounded, and it's terrible.
There's like not supportive, and then there's, I don't know, anti-supportive.
It's also, the jokes on the unit when someone walks in with a birth plan, like, oh, get the operating room open.
Yeah.
Like that we're coming in from the start being, like you said, like counter-supportive. Like we're disabling them from being able to achieve something that they want.
So I ended up switching to the OB who had probably delivered like half the babies in the Frum community. He was on to a second generation, and he was really nice. He was really supportive. What I realized later, I hadn't realized while I was still pregnant, was that he had a few really hard experiences with women who had really complicated experiences postpartum, and he was way more cautious than he needed to be. But again, I may have been all educated and empowered, and I had my doula, but I'd never done this before, and I do have a chronic illness, and I wasn't 100% well. I was on medication, so I was complicated, and he had me doing significantly more monitoring than I needed. I learned later a lot of ultrasounds every 3 weeks with monitoring in between. And as soon as I hit 40 weeks, he said, I don't think your baby's growing well. I think you have a growth restriction. It was Erev Shabbos. He said, I can have the baby out by mincha. And I said, hold on, we've been talking about, it was January. Mincha was
Low
really
intervention
early.
birth, yeah.
Like, we were talking about my low intervention birth, and he said, look, if I could go to Vegas on the odds that your baby is fine, I'd be wealthy. Or something like that. I'm not so good with my gambling analogies, but he was telling me he thought everything was fine, but just in case. So I actually did not have a great doula for that birth, but she saved this one, because when I called her to ask, she said, just ask to be induced. Like, your cervix is not ripe. It's hard. It's in the wrong spot. Like, nothing's going on. Just try it. Because if you don't try it, you're going to be unhappy that you didn't try. So I got checked in for an induction. It was a long, hard, slow process. It was over Shabbos. I really didn't want an epidural.
Just to clarify, your doctor said he was proposing a C-section to get the baby out by mincha?
Sorry. There was no other way to get the baby out by mincha. I wasn't dilated at all. Yeah. There was like literally nothing. Sorry. There was nothing going on.
So he was basically proposing a primary cesarean, and his cited indication was because of your Crohn's, because the baby wasn't growing correctly, and because of because he wasn't sure, actually.
Because he was nervous. It was because he was nervous, and he was getting tired of being nervous, I think.
Yeah, he wasn't sure if your baby was growing appropriately, and again, there's a very broad range of what growing appropriately means, and because you were high risk, you had Crohn's disease, so he was just proposing a primary cesarean with not even a trial of labor, not even trying.
No trial of labor.
Providers don't get credit. I'll say more doctors, they don't get credit for promoting a vaginal birth. They get flack for having bad outcomes from a vaginal birth and for not performing a cesarean in time. Like, that's what they get flack for. So of course they are more inclined to do cesarean.
It's admirable. I admire the goal of healthy baby, healthy mommy.
But we overlook the fallout of a cesarean, that having a cesarean in and of itself will create a lot of risk for other problems.
It changes your whole birthing future, and it changes a lot of other things as well.
If you have been struggling with nausea and vomiting from your pregnancy, Ematerm might be the answer for you. Ematerm is a safe and effective anti-nausea wristband that prevents and relieves nausea and vomiting induced by pregnancy or motion, such as car and boat rides. It releases a low-frequency pulse that travels through the body's nervous system to the part of the brain which controls the stomach. This interrupts the nausea signal pathways. Ematerm is FDA cleared and designed to put you in control when you need drug-free therapy with no worries about potential side effects. Users can choose from 5 levels of intensity to achieve the best effect. The unique wristband design holds the device in place and makes it easy to put on and take off. It is FSA and HSA eligible, comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee and a 1-year warranty. Go to ematerm.com, that's EMETERM.com, and use code HAPPYBIRTHWAY for 20% off of your purchase. You can find the link in the episode show notes. Having a fussy, nonstop crying baby can take all the joy out of motherhood. Is it gas? Is it constipation? Is it colic? It's hard to know, but there is a solution for all of those. Happy Tummy is a waistband that comes with an herbal pouch. When you microwave the pouch and apply the waistband to your fussy baby, your baby is instantly soothed. That's thanks to a natural formulation of herbs including flaxseed, chamomile, lemongrass, peppermint, spearmint, and lavender. Happy Tummy is all natural, no drugs or drops. And not only does it quickly soothe your baby, but it smells terrific. Happy Tummy also has adult-sized waistbands, which mothers love for cramps, stomach aches, and back aches. Use my code HAPPYBIRTHWAY for 10% off your whole order on happytummy.com. That's HAPPITUMMI.com, code HAPPYBIRTHWAY for 10% off.
So when I said no, I want to be induced, he sent me to a maternal fetal medicine doctor on another floor who did a scan and said, actually, your placenta looks great. Maybe your fluid's a little low. It wouldn't hurt to get induced, which is his language. I don't know if I agree entirely. Wouldn't hurt to get induced. So I got induced. I didn't get an epidural originally, but I had one of those nurses who is just not comfortable with natural labor. Like, she stayed out of the room as much as possible. She told my doula it was Shabbos, so we weren't calling. The doula was calling her. She told the doula I was fine. By the time the doula came, it was like 1 p.m., 2 p.m. My water had broken early in the morning. I don't know if it was because of having the Cervidil overnight or there was a barometric pressure change. Like, whatever it was, it had a slow leak. So things started. They started Pitocin. And then by the time she came, I had been on fluid for so long and I was not able to pee. because of I just couldn't do it while the Pitocin was running. And instead of them offering to do a straight cath or anything like that, they said, like, you need to get your epidural. You're uncomfortable. You've only gotten to 2 centimeters. And I was done. Fine. You know, like, I was fighting and I could only fight so much. So I got my epidural. They emptied out a lot of urine that I hadn't been able to empty myself. And my doula said to me, she was laughing and she said, if you think that was bad, like, you should feel 8 centimeters. It was like it was a really disempowering experience. I ended up writing her a letter later. Anyway, so it's fine. Thank God it all progressed. And, you know, I pushed for 3 hours. They vacuumed. Ironically, the one part of my birth plan that went exactly as planned was that my gastroenterologist had said, if you need an episiotomy, ask them to do a mediolateral episiotomy, to do a sideways one, which they're more painful. They don't heal as quickly, but they keep you from tearing down into the rectum. And that was important because of my Crohn's. So they did do that.
Was that upon your request?
That was per my request. That was on my birth plan. So that was the one thing, which I'm glad that they did it, because I think it was the right call at the time. And when the baby came out, I mean, they used a vacuum, they got her out, and the doctor, because I was exhausted. It had been going on forever. I pushed for 3 hours. They vacuumed her, and the doctor said, "This is not a growth restricted baby." Oh. Was the first thing she said, and I was like, okay, like, the whole thing was done. You know, like, the experience was done. I had pain through the whole time I pushed. Even with the epidural, it was miserable. But I got my baby. She was beautiful. She was healthy. And I went into remission from my Crohn's shortly after giving birth.
Wow.
So altogether, like, it really, things pulled together. So that was my first kind of miserable medical experience with birth, where I didn't get anything I wanted, except I didn't get a C-section, which I'm really grateful for, because it definitely simplified things going forward.
Yeah.
So after my first was born, that was when I, like, found my soapbox, that I was obsessed with women's health. I was obsessed with birth.
So that's what opened you up to the entire area of women's health and birth. Prior to that, you were an ICU nurse.
Yeah, I was going to do critical care. I was thinking of maybe doing wound ostomy or palliative care. And then I had this baby and I had this experience, and I thought, whoa, there's this whole world here that I'm deeply passionate about. And I was missing all that education. I want to give it to other people. So I went back for my master's. And again, I was pregnant with my second, and I looked at my insurance, which was the same insurance policy. So it was either that hospital again, or I could use a birth center. My insurance policy would cover a birth center. So I was in nurse midwifery school, and I was reviewing all the data, you know, what the risks, what the benefits are. And I asked my GI doctor, my gastroenterologist, and she referred me to maternal fetal medicine at one of the big university hospitals. And I was approved for an out-of-hospital birth. My Crohn's was in remission at the time. I needed more growth scans, you know, 1 per trimester, just to make sure that everything continued to be fine. And I had this, like, super hippie midwife. And we told the family that I was going to have an out-of-hospital birth. I was going to be going to a birth center. And things just went smoothly. And I did a lot of talking. You know, when you see a midwife, especially a hippie midwife, they did everything according to standard. I mean, I was in school at the time, so I knew that they were following everything, but they talked a lot. At some points, I was like, I don't need to be having an hour-long meeting to talk about, you know, everything. So it was a very supported experience. And I felt very in control of what was going on. Throughout that pregnancy, what was happening to me, and I had a very active role, and that was where I really learned the power of having a team that you felt you're part of a team with, you know, not that you're a team against. And at the very end of my pregnancy, we had some assignment to read a book, and I read this amazing book by a midwife who worked with the Amish doing home births. And I was like, wait a second. I'm closer to the hospital in my house than I would be at that birth center. And I decided to go ahead and do a home birth. We didn't tell anyone. Again, it was approved. Like, I got the approval from the medical, my medical team gave me approval. My midwife was confident. And I ended up having a really fast, intense, safe, healthy home birth on the day before Purim. It was an amazing experience.
And that's so interesting. That's really, I have to say, that piece that you realize that should transfer become necessary, you would get to the hospital faster if you gave birth at home than if you gave birth at a birth center.
We were within walking distance. Like on Shabbos, you could walk to the hospital. So it was very different, very empowering. It wasn't, one of those glowing, beautiful home birth, hippie, water birth experiences at all.
Orgasmic,
No, my gosh, none of that. It was really painful, intense, but at the same time, really empowering. Yeah. I really delivered. Like, I gave birth to that baby. Forget doing it like on my own terms. I did it in my own bedroom, on my own bed. A couple of months later, when I was nursing and I needed a colonoscopy, and the anesthesiologist told me that she wouldn't give me full anesthesia unless I promised to pump and dump for 24 hours, which is medically unnecessary.
Correct.
I told her I wouldn't. She said, well, I'm just not going to give you anesthesia. And I said, well, I just had a baby on my bed, so look what I can do. Mm-hmm. And I went through it. I really felt like I am woman, hear me roar. So it really...
Birth is transformative. Women, after birth, they access a certain inner strength that they have within themselves that they may not access ever otherwise.
Yeah. So for me, it was really important. It was really healing from the experience that I'd had before, and it was good.
Before we continue, I wanted to let you know about a revolutionary diaper brand called Diaper, D-Y-P-E-R. These eco-friendly diapers are made with viscose from bamboo, so they're soft on your baby's skin while still being extra absorbent to handle your baby's biggest accidents. Diaper wants to pass on the savings directly to you by cutting out the middleman. They ship your diapers to you for a low, predictable price with no extras or gotchas. Set your subscription and let them deliver the exact quantity you need. If you need more, they'll deliver them promptly with their exclusive SOS service. If you need less, send them back with a prepaid label. You can precisely manage your deliveries using their website or their mobile app. One of the products that I think is really cool is their Diaper Sense. It's a small sensor that you attach to your baby's diaper, and it continuously monitors the temperature and humidity surrounding their skin. It will help you optimize your diaper changes, reduce overall diaper use, and may help reduce instances of skin rash due to prolonged exposure to moisture. All you do is snap it to the outside of the diaper and connect it to Diaper's app. It will notify you when number 1 or number 2 happens. Subscribe through the link in my show notes and you will get a free bonus diaper bag just for trying them out. You can cancel anytime with no obligation, but still keep the bag. KiwiCo crates are a monthly subscription of crates that come filled with age-appropriate STEAM projects for kids, from toddlers to teenagers and even adults. STEAM stands for science, technology, engineering, art, and math. Every crate explores a different theme designed to spark creativity, thinking, and learning. All projects, inspiration, and activities are created by a team of product designers in-house and rigorously tested by kids. KiwiCo offers all different product lines spanning a variety of interest and age ranges. Panda Crate is for babies from 0 to 24 months. Each crate helps babies learn by doing what they do best: playing, exploring, and most importantly, interacting with the people in their lives. Crates arrive every other month and are filled with 2 months worth of content. So if you're trying to figure out what a developmentally appropriate way to interact with your baby is, Panda Crates will take the guesswork out. For an exclusive 30% off discount on your first month subscription, go to kiwico.com, that's KIWICO.com, and enter code LEARN30 at checkout. That's kiwico.com, code LEARN30 at checkout.
My next baby, I had at a birth center. I switched midwives. I wanted a slightly less hippie midwife. I wanted to kind of see how that would work out. And a little less granola, little more like office appeal. Mm-hmm. I can't explain. But that was another, like a good birth. I found myself more able to have a spiritual birth with that one because it was much slower and I did a lot more preparation of things I wanted to think about because I felt that was lacking in the second one. Like, I felt powerful, didn't necessarily feel very connected, and it was fast. It was posterior. She was sunny side up, so it took a lot longer to labor her down, to finish dilating, to push her out. And I felt like it gave me the opportunity to connect spiritually with the birth experience it was more painful, but it was calmer, and it left room for that. So that was kind of my second birth left me feeling really empowered, and my third birth gave me a real feeling of connectedness, which I appreciated. And thank God that one was also smooth and healthy. And what was interesting is that I had that episiotomy with my first birth, and I had been induced, and nothing seemed like it was going to go right. And my second and third, I was a little bit overdue. I didn't tear at all. They were they were smooth. They were intervention free, and they were really smooth. So they were painful. They weren't this, euphoric experience, but they were not complicated. And I was able to see my body work the way that it was meant to work, which I really appreciated.
Yeah, especially for someone like you who's dealing with chronic other condition in their body that, you know, might feel like frustrating, like, why can't my body just do what it's supposed to do like everyone else's? And I guess this is an area that must have been healing for you to show you that your body can do the things that it's supposed to do in another organ system.
Absolutely. So that was kind of what I told myself, like, one system's down, but this system works great. And it really was healing in a big way. My fourth pregnancy was, again, was more like my first. I started having a flare of Crohn's at the very beginning of it, honestly, right before I got pregnant, but we thought that it was a very low-level flare and it wouldn't be a problem. But as soon as I got pregnant, things got worse. We were making Aliyah at the time, and there was this big shift because the system in Israel is so different than the system in the United States. You're automatically put on a high-risk pregnancy track for a very long list of conditions, which included Crohn's disease. So more frequent ultrasounds, just kind of like a different attitude, a different system. Just to summarize, I ended up having a miscarriage at 18 weeks. And not necessarily because of my Crohn's, although we never really did find out why. It was probably some kind of cord accident where the baby got a true knot. And I had a Doppler to listen to heartbeats at home, which I had bought before we made Aliyah. So I was the one to find out that the baby didn't have a heartbeat. I just had this heavy sense that something was not right. And my husband was telling me, like, have a little faith. Why are you being negative? And then I had an excuse to check, and I checked, and I was like, there's not a heartbeat. I'm sure there's something wrong. And I had, the least American experience of having to have a late miscarriage in the U.S. You can tell me if I'm wrong. I think it's normally done in labor and delivery at that point.
Yeah, somewhere after 18 weeks. Mm-hmm.
So in Israel, they put me on like the gynecology, med-surg, orthopedics floor. Something so random. And in a really small hospital in Tveria. And I had to request my own room to deliver the baby. And because it is a birth, you have to push out the baby when it's that big. And it was really hard. It was hard. And I didn't know this before I went through it, but the same way the woman has postpartum blues after she gives birth, that starts pretty early. So there's a big hormone shift that happens also if a woman has a miscarriage after a certain number of weeks. So I had that grieving process compounded with the postpartum blues, and it was heavy. It was definitely a heavy experience, and we were new to being here. And like you said before, I had just come through a couple births where my perspective on myself had changed. I went from being someone who was a chronically ill person, even if I had a great attitude and I continued going through school and life and everything, it was still part of who I was, to this powerful mama baby bearing person, to being like, oh, I guess I'm not in control of this system either. It's not perfect. And it was hard, but it was a growing experience. Yeah. And it definitely informed how I work with other women, because if I had gone through everything being like, well, I can do this and it'll work out the way I want, and my body works, sorry if yours doesn't, that's that wouldn't be great. So it added
another layer.
It added another layer. Yeah. And and I needed to get my Crohn's under control after that too. I had to switch medications, and then 1 year after that baby was due, I was again due with another baby, and I had thank God, my fifth pregnancy, so my fourth baby was a healthy pregnancy. We went into a COVID lockdown about a month before she was born. So I gave birth the day I was discharged from the hospital, the day that the mask mandate came out in Israel. So like anyways, so I was home. It was the whole thing was weird, but I was having a healthy pregnancy. I was feeling much better actually than I felt in my other pregnancies, probably because I walked so much more in Israel. So my body was in much better shape, but for whatever reason, my baby was transverse. She was sideways. So here at 37 weeks, they like to do a version, turn the baby and go straight to induction. And I did not feel comfortable going straight to induction at 37 weeks. I mean, in the US, they beat it into you. You need to go to 39 if possible. So I couldn't do it. So I did all these exercises from spinning babies, and I did actually turn her. By 38 weeks, she was head down. And then at 40 plus 4, I every morning was waking up and doing Leopold's maneuvers on myself to see where the baby was lying, because it was something I was trained to do. And I was like, oh no, like I'm having these early contractions and she is no longer head down. So we went to the hospital, and it took like the whole day for them to get around to seeing me, because again, it's not an American experience. And they said, oh my gosh, your baby's not head down, you're having contractions, we need to go do a C-section right now. And I was like, hold on, I am empowered, I am educated, I am not a new mommy, I'm not even new to the Israeli system, like I know what to do here. And I said, no, I'm not going to have a C-section right now, that's not going to work out for me, like you're going to need to find another solution. So they said, okay. I was like, you can turn her. She just turned. I'm positive that there's still space. And so they checked. I was 3 centimeters dilated. I might have been walking around at 3 centimeters dilated for weeks. No one had checked yet. So again, I wasn't going to let them decide for me that was the excuse. That was the reason. And they ended up, I honestly don't know who they found to turn her, because it's in Sfat. It's not like a top of the line hospital. But on the other hand, it kind of gives them flexibility. Yeah, they're like more flexible than you'd find at one of these more professional hospitals. So they found who they could find, and they turned the baby and they started Pitocin, and I had an induction without an epidural. It was very fast. Again, I had the unfortunate feeling the whole time that I was fighting with the doctor who was on call, because it was an induction and it was complicated. I didn't get put in the midwife, because most deliveries in Israel are by midwives. I wasn't put under her care. I was put under the doctor's care, and we fought all the way until she vacuumed that baby out. And so I've had this odd experience of having my hospital deliveries were both vacuum. My out-of-hospital births were not vacuum. This time I did an induction without an epidural, which had its own, that was its own empowering thing, because I had always said to myself, if I ever need to get induced again, I'll get an epidural. That first one was terrible, but I had the skills and I had the experience to make it through an induction without an epidural, which I know you've talked about doing that as well. So that was important. They didn't have laughing gas because of COVID. They wouldn't use it. But yeah, and she was born, and we got through it. And that was a very long, honestly, that birth is a story for its own, that's its own story of how different that experience was than something that would have happened in the U.S. You know what they do? They still do apply fundal pressure from the top.
Oh, no. Oh my gosh, please.
So there was some random man sitting on me, and I'm screaming, get off. And he looked to my husband to see if my husband wanted him to get off. It was so Middle Eastern. I was like, hold on, I, the woman in the bed giving birth, would like you to get off of me. You're not supposed to be doing that. Anyways, yeah. So
this is such this is such a clear portrayal of how different each pregnancy can go for everyone. Anyone. You can have a healthy and it's such a clear portrayal of how every pregnancy and birth can go. You can have one totally low intervention, low risk pregnancy birth, and then you can have something completely different and throw in a wrench. And this is such a great example of that. And
thank God I came away with a healthy baby from all my 4 births of healthy babies, like they were very different experiences, and they had happy endings. And I would say that I definitely had trauma that I needed to process from the first one, and I had trauma that I needed to process from my last birth. And I did work with someone to get over it. I had like some symptoms of PTSD after the experience, but there, like, you can have a healthy baby and you can have a healthy delivery. I interestingly, I never tore after that first episiotomy I had, births 2, 3, 4, or 5, like whatever it is. I've never torn again, even with a vacuum delivery. So my body went through it okay, and my soul got different things out of each one, I would say. My experience as a person and motherhood. But yeah, it is interesting how everything can change from time to time.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, so we have to wrap up, but I want to ask you one more question. Can you transfer your profession as a women's health nurse practitioner to Israel? Is there any equivalent to that, or would you have to go to midwifery school or something all over again?
So it's a good question. My bachelor's and my master's have both been recognized by the Department of Education. My nursing education has been recognized. They don't have the role of a women's health nurse practitioner in Israel, and they don't have the flexibility to stick it under another category. They're still in the beginning stages of getting nurse practitioners, partly because the way they've structured it here is different. Like, you can be a diabetes nurse practitioner or an oncology nurse practitioner, but the focus is different.
The focus sounds like more if it's on a medical specialty versus a population.
Yes, and women's health here is a complicated field because there's very little time given to appointments because it's primary care, not a specialty. So it's a whole complicated thing. But in short, no, I cannot transfer women's health NP to Israel at this time, which is partly why I've really shifted my focus to education and doing consultations with women, because and I get to work as a bodechet, but I really enjoy working with women. I enjoy all the different aspects of women's health care, of women's taking care of women over the lifespan, and there's just so much that people need to know. So maybe this is an opportunity for me to focus on what happens outside the clinic itself.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Thank you for doing all this great work, Yonah. Can you please tell our audience how they can reach you? And I'm going to put the links in the episode show notes as well.
Sure. So I have the Panema Wellness website at fromwomenshealth.com. From with a U, women with an E. And I have a Panema Wellness podcast, which you can access on Spotify, Apple, or through my website. And on the website itself, I regularly post blog posts with women's health and halacha education.
This was such an enriching experience to hear so many different sides of your personal experiences and your professional experiences. And I'm so grateful that you joined. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for tuning into the Happy Birthway podcast. Head over to Yoledet Academy on Instagram to continue the conversation. You'll find the link in the episode show notes, as well as links to any additional resources, products, and services mentioned here. If you love listening to this show, you can help it grow by sharing it with your friends and rating and reviewing it. To stay in the loop when new episodes are released, make sure to subscribe. Remember that your health needs are unique and require individualized medical advice. The podcast is not a replacement, and some of the information may not be appropriate for your specific circumstances. My mission is to educate you so that you can confidently collaborate with your healthcare team. I believe that a healthy mom and healthy baby are simply not enough. We also need a happy mom with an empowering birth experience.